Greetings, YouTube. One of the things that people love in video games are survival crafting systems. And one of the guys I watched Gopher recently started doing one along with his friends Che and Cortico, I think her name is, where they are essentially be surviving in a zombie apocalypse. And it's kind of silly because essentially you have to start with like Neolithic tools and work your way up, even though it's contemporary urban America. Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense. Um, but that got me thinking about death in general. And for some reason, I just kind of jumped myself ahead of what would you be doing if you wanted to make sure that your dead did not come back. So it got me thinking about, of course, it's the classic um, cremation. There's also in a world of high fantasy magic, there's disintegration spells. You can have a disintegration chamber for a single person. You put them in there, you say your prayers, have your ceremonies, you push a button or say a magic word, and all of a sudden, poof, gone. Or if you're on the cheap, you have a 10 by 10 cube, which is I believe what the original disintegration spell worked on, was a 10 by 10 cube. I could be wrong there, but correct me if I am. And you put a bunch of bodies in there. If you can't afford to have an individual ceremony, they put a whole bunch of bodies in there, and when it's filled to the brim, again, magic word, gone. Okay, very safe. They aren't coming back to haunt you. Which then got me thinking about how elves would get rid of their dead in a just like traditional elves, and they might have sky burials like some Indians do in India. And then I'm like, okay, it's dwarves, and are probably going to just put their dead into big tombs because they're under the ground and under the earth, and they have lots of space to dig catacombs and tombs and family tombs that go off into all directions, generation after generation, going deeper and deeper. And each family has their own section, and each body is in its own stone sarcophagus. You get the point. They're dwarves. Which then got me thinking. Dwarves live under the earth. And if you're going to look at that from a survival perspective, base building, you should really treat it like building a space colony on a planet that is inhospitable to organic life. Because under the earth is very inhospitable to humanoids. There's no sun. There's no soil. There's often not enough air. You can sometimes have enough water, but sometimes it's where you don't want it. So if you start thinking about it, how better to look upon that dwarven underground colony or steading as a space colony. It has to be self-contained. It has to be self-sufficient. Now, one of the things I've seen people talk about in the past is like in the mountains that the dwarves would have like valleys where they have halflings or gnomes with, dwarven, liaisons, probably the retired folks who can't mine anymore, so they get to literally go out to the pasture and just be the liaisons between these farmers and the dwarves beneath the earth, and they trade for all the things that the dwarves need that they can't get, like wheat and wool and things like that. But there's lots of things that you still have to compensate for, like the air. It's not always going to be convenient to have air shafts everywhere. And the deeper you go, the less convenient and more difficult that gets. It becomes geometrically more difficult as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, getting that air in and that air out so that you have a circulation and people don't die and there's not horrible fumes. But there's also the whole, how do you get food there? Aquaculture, maybe underground types of hydroculture, things like that. And it's very much looking at these underground dwarven colonies as space stations, as planetary bases, because you need to make them as absolutely self-sufficient as possible with their own power sources and everything that could possibly be done on their own in a sealed environment, so that in the event they get themselves cut off through happenstance or war that they're not going to starve. They're not going to lose out on, food and all the resources and air. I mean, think about it. If air is a problem and you aren't good enough at handling it, all your enemy has to do is cut off your air and then just sit back and wait. And then they just get themselves a new base as they clear the bodies out. And I don't know if I've ever seen anyone treat the the underworld colonies of dwarves as space structures, as being self-sufficient like that. Now, I may have touched on this in the past. I don't know. I've been doing this for almost 14 years at the time of this recording. It'll probably, by the time you see this, it'll be for more than 14 years. And I've been doing it every day, so I honestly can't tell you how many times I've touched on certain subjects and how many I haven't. I've got thousands of videos in this channel. So let's talk about how would you run a dwarven colony beneath the earth to make it as self-sufficient as you can, to give it as much, robust redundancy as is possible. Because if there's any species, any lineage in a high fantasy game that's going to be all about redundancy, it's going to be dwarves. So let's talk about how dwarves not just make plan A and plan B, but they've got like Z to the 27th power.